This short video is going to discuss the purpose of the literature review. And again, this is something you'll be working on pretty much the first half of the semester. The purpose of the literature review is to find a set of published research reports that define your research topic, that tell you what the current state of that knowledge is. The purpose of your project is to identify a gap in that knowledge that you'll attempt to fill with your experiment. So there's two basic goals. One is we want to gain some general familiarity with the topic, basically, your area of interest. So you may know very little or you may know a lot about your research topic. And so as you've read in the pages that I've provided, is that there's a difference between that primary and secondary sources. And so those primary sources is what your literature review is going to be based on, looking at those primary research articles. Secondary sources are going to be helpful in helping you, again, gain some familiarity with that research, some background, some vocabulary that you may not be aware of. The second goal is to find a small set of studies that serve as the basis for your research idea. So as you're going through these articles, you'll start formulating different ideas, and we've talked in a previous video about how you can use different parts of those articles to formulate those ideas. So when you're conducting a literature search, you want to narrow down your general idea to a specific research question. And we've discussed this a little bit, right? So how you kind of start with this general topic and eventually you'll narrow it down. That might mean that you have to find more than 6 articles. You need to present 6 articles in your literature review, but you want them all to be fairly relevant. So you might start with a general topic. As you're reading in those kind of general overview ideas, you narrow it down, and so then you may have to find some extra articles. So you want to find all published information that document and support your specific research question. And again, a good starting point is those secondary sources, those review articles, textbooks, those types of things. That's kind of where you start, and those don't end up, you might reference them in your literature review, but they're not going to be one of those 6 references that are required. So again, you start with this general idea, textbooks, introductions, review articles, discussions, and then you come up with a specific question, and you want to make sure that those 6 articles that you're going to be reviewing in that literature review support that specific question. So as you're doing your little literature search, you want to make note of the subject words or keywords. And so this is just an example here of an abstract. I couldn't fit the whole thing, but here you see at the bottom of the abstract, it lists the keywords that if you search these words up, you're going to definitely find this article. So it's kind of important to note these keywords. These words are going to identify and describe the variables of the study and characteristics of the participants. And so it's helpful as you're doing your literature search to take note of the keywords that you use when you're searching. So as you type in your little search terms, write those down so that you're not, if you come back a couple days later, you're not putting in those same keywords and getting the exact same articles, or you know how to narrow it down or make it more or broad in your search. Another thing that's helpful is to make note of author names. So as you're going through the literature, you might notice that one author's name comes up time and time again. Now, you don't want all 6 of your articles to be from the same author or the same group of researchers, but having 2, maybe even 3 might be okay if they're a lead researcher in the area. But make note of those names, because sometimes maybe you could find other articles by just searching up their name. So again, some authors' names will be encountered repeatedly, and those are going to be considered those leading researchers in the field. Again, I recommend keeping a document of those keywords and author names as well. So as you're doing your literature search, you're going to need to find ways to weed out kind of irrelevant material. So there's different ways of doing this. I'm going to give you one way, and then I think the librarian in the library session will give you a different way. But first, just look at the title. Does the title seem relevant? So when you do your search, I searched memory and music, the effect of background music on episodic memory. That seems relevant, right? So I look at the title in my search, or if an article comes up, I look at the title first and just see, does that make sense? So if my topic of interest is music and memory, this title doesn't really fit. This fits more with question wording and memory, false memories, things like that. A second screening can be the abstract. Now, this is definitely not where you're going to get most of your information. the information you're going to need for that literature review. But it's just a start to say, does it sound like it's relevant to my research question? Next, you want to also look for a link to a full text version. If you can't find that full text, it's not worth it. So here, if you're using EBSCOhost through the college, you're going to see, okay, I've looked at my title. It seems relevant. This is an author that's a leading author in the field. And oh, this is fabulous. I have access to the full text. If you don't see that, that's when you want to very quickly go back to Google or someplace else and see if you Google the name of the research article, and maybe type in PDF at the end, does something come up? A lot of places you'll find it, you'll be able to find that full text version. You can also sometimes look up the first author's names, and sometimes they'll have websites where they have links to their own personal research that they've done. If you can't find it as a full text, you either need to move on or you need to very quickly go to the librarian. Even I know we're not on campus, but go to the librarian and they can do an interlibrary loan. It takes a couple of weeks, but so that's why it's important to do your literature search early. And if you need help, go to that librarian and get that interlibrary loan. I'll also say here, if you have friends that are at four-year universities, especially research universities like UCLA, UCI, USC, if they're willing to let you or to look for you to see if you can get access, sometimes bigger schools have access to more free full text articles. So if the article still looks relevant, if you have that full link to the full text version, read it carefully. Okay. And again, having the full text is important. You are not going to get the details that you need for this type of literature search without the full text. And then use the references from the articles you have to expand your literature search. If you're struggling saying, I can't find, 6 articles, they're out there. If they're not out there, then it's not a topic you should be researching. But go to the references and you can look up some of these and say, oh, hey, look through the titles. This one sounds like it's perfect. Okay, let me just copy and paste this title into Google and see what comes up. That's also, if you're using secondary sources to kind of get a baseline of knowledge about the topic, is they're going to talk about all sorts of articles in that secondary source. Maybe some of those you think are really good. Use a citation in the text, go to the references, find that citation, and then try to find that article. That's just a different way of approaching the literature search. So how do you know when you're done with your literature search? One, you need to feel comfortable with your knowledge about the topic area. So again, you're going to present 6 primary research articles in your literature review. That doesn't mean that you'll only read 6 articles. You may need to read more so that you feel comfortable with the topic area. You found a few recent studies that are relevant. So not all of your studies have to be within the last 5 years, but I would say at least half of them should have been within the last 5 years. How many articles is enough? So the key criterion for any literature review is that it just provides some justification for your new research, that it provides you ideas for that research. You need 6 primary research articles for your assignment. So this table from your text just goes over some of the key components of a research article. If you don't think you've kind of gotten the important parts of a research article from some of the other things I've provided to you, take a look and go over this table that's in your text, or you can go back to the lecture notes and look over it. The key thing when you're looking for a primary research article, again, is to make sure that it has a methods section where it discusses participants and procedure, and a results section. If it doesn't have those, even if it's discussing research, it's probably a review article, and those are not considered one of those 6 required articles for your paper.